Okay, welcome to your tutorial on the Behringer X-18 Air digital mixer and the Behringer X Air edit application to control it, as well as a little bit of an intro to digital mixing. As you can see on the screen, I have the Behringer X Air edit program open. This controls the mixer. This program is available for iPad, for iPhone, also for Android-based devices. You're going to run it on just about any phone, any tablet, any laptop, PC, or Mac. It's available for just about everything. So since we control the mixer wirelessly, it allows us to walk around the room and do what we need to do from various perspectives. Additionally, more than one person can be connected to it at once. So you could have people listening to it from multiple perspectives, making changes, and each operator would be able to see those changes being made by themselves and by the other operator in real time. Okay, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you do when you open the program is to go to Setup. This is where we're going to connect to the mixer. Okay? And you'll be in the Connect tab. And the first time you connect your client or your Behringer X Air edit software, you need to type in an IP address for the mixer, which is 192.168.1.1. Again, that's 192.168.1.1. And you would click search. Now, I'm not on the church network at the moment, so I'm not going to be able to see the device. However, for the purposes of this tutorial, I really don't need to. But if I were, I would click search. It would show the device here in this list. I would click connect, and the next question it would ask me is, do I want to sync from the console to the PC or from the PC to the console? Note that I have console to PC selected as my default. The reason being that you almost always want to go in this direction. What that means is the settings on the console as they were the last time it was turned off are going to download into your software. And all your faders are going to adjust accordingly, and your equalizers and everything. They're going to retrieve their information from the console. Whereas if this were clicked, it would upload whatever settings you had in this software to the console. A very big disadvantage if you've just installed the software and you're connecting to the console for the first time, because your configuration in software is going to be blank and it's going to erase the Behringer X-18. Not a big deal because we're going to keep backups of the configuration. It'll be easy to recall. If you ever make that mistake, it's not the end of the world. But just as a rule of thumb, almost always synchronize console to PC when it asks you. After that, you're going to see this status change to connected, and you can close this window. All these other tabs are for advanced features that we won't worry about here. So we'll close this window. And now we will look at the Mixer tab, which is what we're actually clicked on right now. The Mixer tab here. You'll notice that this looks very much like a regular analog board with some kind of nifty features and graphics up here that we're not really used to seeing. But really, from this screen does about all the same things. I have my mutes to mute or unmute channels, just like I do on an analog desk. I can control my volume to my mains. Build a decent little drum mix here, just for an example. Okay. I can also control the name of the channel as well as the color, which is kind of neat. I like to make my drums yellow, but there is no convention for this whatsoever. So I right-click on the name, like I just did, and let's call it Kick 1. And let's say I want it to be purple, because I'm in that kind of mood. Alright, my kick drum is now purple. Okay? But I just changed my mind, so now I want it to be yellow. And I no longer want it to be kick 1, so I do that. And again, I just click on it when I'm done, and there it is. It also allows you to solo any channel, which will isolate that channel for you to listen to. Not entirely by itself, but it'll boost it significantly. Notice its corresponding clear solo button over here. Talk about that later. Turns it off. That's from the analog world too, from the days when there were 400 channels and you might not know which one was soloed. You always had this button to just turn it off instead of hunting for it. So as we go up the channel, we have a pan control here, which you just click and drag to pan to the right or pan to the left, okay, or leave it in the center. We have this little window, which is the compressor window. There's also a corresponding compressor tab up here that allows you to set it for this channel. Compression and equalization and gate, the three main effects on a digital mixer, will be explained in another tutorial to save time. This is the equalizer control, on-off control. Okay, equalizer's off now. It's on now. This is the noise gate control. Gate's off, gate's on. All of these are the various send and input controls. I recommend that you not use them for the simple reason that they are unlabeled. It's about the only thing I really don't like about this version of the software is that I don't know what send this is or what send this is. And I just don't ever adjust them here because, look, we have a little tab called sends. We can do it there. Additionally, I can invert the polarity of the microphone, which I might do if I had two mics in very close proximity to each other, such as a mic on the top and on the bottom of the snare drum. To avoid phase interference problems, and mics that are very close together, you very often would invert the polarity of one of them. Or if you're having very unusual and hard to pin down feedback problems with a mic, sometimes inverting the polarity can solve that as well. Okay. You can also turn on and off phantom power for condenser mics, and you can stereo link channels. Clicking that, notice it highlights on channel 2. So these two are linked now, and it basically means that the same source would go to both of them, like in the case of my guitar rig, for example, which is run in stereo. Would go to both of those now, left and right, and or a keyboard or something like that. So you can do that there as well. You can also adjust gain here, again just by clicking and dragging. It's just like the gain button at the very top of the strips on our analog board. 0 is desired, but in the real world you got to turn it up. Sometimes you got to turn it below 0, so it allows you to do that as well. And let's see, that's everything on the strip, okay, in the mixer view. Now, let's talk about the single most difficult concept for people to grasp, people that have learned to mix on an analog desk. We're very used to looking at everything linearly, right? If that's a word, in a line. Everything is controlled all the way to the top, right? That's a strip, and it goes all the way to the top of the board. And it doesn't really work that way in the digital realm. This is the principle to remember. It's the hard principle to remember, but easy to apply. Whatever channel is selected, and you select by clicking on the name, whatever channel is selected is the channel you are editing in any of these tabs, with the exception of meter and mixer. Mixer is what we're looking at now, right? Which allows you to, even though this is selected, I could mute channel 1, right? And meter I'll talk about later. It only shows levels, so there's nothing you can edit in there anyway. So all of these channels, and on digital mixers in general, whatever is selected is what you are editing. I have many, many times been working on a problem with a particular channel, endlessly trying to EQ it, compress it, set the gain right, and it just wouldn't get fixed. The problem just stayed and stayed and stayed. And then I realize 20 minutes later that I'm actually working on the wrong channel, because that's the channel that's highlighted. And I've totally messed up that other channel without realizing it. So when you have a situation like that, you're changing stuff and it's just not working, it's not doing what you expect, always fall back and check, what is it that I am working on? It's a general rule. If it's highlighted, you're working on it. Okay? So the first tab we see, since we've already been over mixer, is the channel tab. And these tabs are somewhat redundant. Just be aware of that. A lot of these controls are redundant across the tabs. We have a finer mic gain control here. Just allows us a little better control of it. USB trim is more or less the output level if I were to hook this thing up to a computer to record with. You don't need to worry about that at this time. 48 volt phantom power for condenser microphones. Polarity inversion, which we talked about. Stereo linking, which links it to the channel next to it. And effects, on or off. Of course, along with on or off, I have to assign it to one of the effects channels, which we will talk about in a little while. Okay. You also see the noise gate, which is kind of summarized here. These are the very simple settings for it, just the threshold. And sorry about my Facebook notifications that keep creeping into my video, by the way. Anyway, the threshold, which is where the gate engages, and I'll talk about that when we get to the noise gate tab. The equalizer low cut, which I'll talk about in a minute, can be engaged here, and the compressor ratio can be engaged here as well as these can be turned on or off. So I've just turned off the noise gate, the equalizer, and the compressor, but for what channel have I done that? That's right, channel 6. Okay? If I go and I look at channel 3, look at that. The equalizer and the compressor are engaged. Go back to 6 and they're off. So I'll turn them back on. Okay? You also have the aux bus send control. What are the aux buses? Well, these are going to be just like on our analog desk. They will be our monitor sends. That's right, we have 6 of them now. Well, 5, because one of them will be used. So we'll be able to send 5 separate monitor mixes to stage. We can control the level, again, of channel 6 in monitor mix 2, right here, or monitor mix 4. Okay? And this is just one of many places that you can do this. That's another sort of principle of digital mixing, is that there's always more than one place to do it, and the reason they do that is that it's easier for certain applications to be in certain different perspectives of that particular parameter. You can also control effect sends here. Again, we'll talk about effects in a minute. This is more or less the amount of signal that's being sent to the effect. And you can control how it's faded, panning control here. You can also control the assignment to left-right here. You can turn it off. Now channel 6 is no longer going to the main left-right output. Why on earth would you ever want to do that? Well, I can only think of one real plausible scenario. If you had a click track, because you were recording or because your drummer or lead guitar player was rhythmically impaired, you could send a click track just to, say, the in-ear monitors that your band was wearing and not to the main speakers. This is done a lot in pop music to keep the band in time with video sequences, lighting, whatever. Okay, so that is the channel window summary. Let's move on to input. Again, I told you this was somewhat redundant. We have phantom power control, polarity control, and stereo link control, mic gain control again, except here we can decide which input we're controlling. That allows us to go, say I want to control input 1, and it will not change which one is highlighted. What I just did, and this is confusing, but what I just did was I assigned input 1, physical input 1, whatever's plugged in to the number 1 input on the mixer is now going to channel 6. Okay? It's a great feature for advanced routing and recording, but we'll almost never use it. Just know it's there and know that that number should match that number 99.9% of the time. Okay? You have a mic line / USB control, meaning the source of the channel is almost always going to be mic line and not USB. I could use a computer through a USB connection to give this channel sound if I wanted to. Okay? You also again have control of the low cut frequency, which I haven't talked about yet, but I'll go ahead and talk about it quickly. Low cut can be turned on and off. This is a feature on our analog desk. This basically says that when you reach 90 hertz, okay, which is the left side of the equalizer, it's getting pretty low, start to drop the frequencies down at about this slope, okay? And by the time you get down to 60 or 40 hertz, it's pretty much at 0. So this is a good frequency to put it at for, say, cymbals, because you don't want to hear very low frequencies in a cymbal, right? If it was a snare drum, I might set it down around 60. A saxophone might set it down even a little lower, or even a little higher on a vocal mic, depending. But that's where the low cut engages if it's on. Okay, that turns it on and off. Again, we also have control over an effects insert, turning an effect on or off. And we'll talk about that soon. So that is the input tab. For what channel? Channel 6. Right. Alright, so the gate tab for, let's do channel 5 this time. I am now editing channel 5, looking at the gate tab. This noise gate is essentially a way to turn off the input at a certain threshold. It's shown visually here very well, although the axes of the graph are not labeled. This axis down here is essentially input strength, okay? And this axis here is volume. So as we go down, this is probably around 0. So we go down minus 15, minus 20, minus 30, minus 40, minus 50 about here, which is where we're set, the threshold. This is what it does to the volume. When it gets there, it essentially cuts it off. So when a mic gets really quiet to a certain point, it closes the gate and no input comes through there, and that gets rid of hisses and hums and quiet noise in a mix. Very handy, but don't overuse it. If you set these thresholds too high, things start to sound very, well, there's no other word for it other than pumpy. This is what sound guys call it. You can kind of hear the gate opening and closing, and it sounds very unnatural. The same is true of compression, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. Great effect, don't overuse it. It's to polish. It is not to create. Okay? Notice that the noise gate is turned off here. It needs to be highlighted to be on. So now it's on. And you can see that the curve changed when I did that. Okay? It now is set to minus 40 somewhere, minus 55.5 dB. It's going to turn off. Right? That's a little high, actually. Probably somewhere around there for a vocal microphone. And notice these convenient presets. This is a great feature. Set it for a kick drum, set very high, right? Because a kick drum's either on or it's off. There's no quiet kick drum. So it sets it way up around minus 20. Snare drum is also fairly high. Acoustic, guitar, and vocal. Those are all just presets. I'm not going to talk too much about these more advanced settings. Again, I'm probably going to talk about that in a separate tutorial. Okay, on to the EQ tab. The EQ for channel what? 5, the cymbal channel. This is called a parametric equalizer. What that means is it's not a graphic equalizer. I'm not adjusting one frequency. I'm adjusting a group of frequencies. Okay? That's, for an example, engage the low cut filter. Remember, we could engage back on the channel strip as well. And then we can move it by grabbing the circle that represents it up top and moving it to the left or to the right. And it's now set for, let's set it for like 40 hertz. Okay? So 40 hertz, it's going to start dropping. Okay? Now to adjust these others, this is the low. You see the numbers changing under parametric EQ. And the mid, high, and high, all are controlled by grabbing that number and pulling it around. Okay? This is very graphical, so you don't have to think so much about exactly what frequency you're setting. And you can always do this. This button's great. Reset all bands. Yep. Look at that. It undoes anything that you might have done. Leaves the low cut turned on. Okay, note that. But you can always turn that off. And now you got a blank slate. Start over if you just completely messed it up. Okay, which I've done many, many times. RTA is very handy here. It stands for real-time analysis. And what that will do is that will show you, assuming that you're live and the cymbal 1 channel is playing, it will show you the frequencies in a bar graph and how they're responding in terms of decibels being up and down. Okay? So you can actually see where your hills and valleys in the sound are and where you might need to adjust. It's a very, very handy feature. I leave it off by default because it takes up a lot of the communication bandwidth between the controlling computer and the mixer. Okay, so that's the EQ channel. The compression channel. I'm not going to talk about what compression is, except to say that it does the same thing as a gate, except that at a certain frequency, it reduces the volume of the source. And I said frequency, that's not the right word. At a certain level, it reduces the volume of the source. So again, it's set to, minus 10, minus 20, minus 30, which is a decibel reading off the mic itself. And you got to turn it on to see what it does. You see, again, this is signal from the source, and this is volume. Okay? So right now we're set, let's put it up here at about minus 10. So when it gets to minus 10 here, okay, it starts to engage this compressor that lowers the volume. So instead of being a straight line, okay, which it is without a compressor, the line becomes that. As it gets above minus 14.5 dB, it starts to push the sound down a little bit, quiet it down a little bit. Again, very useful for a singer like me who tends to be very, very quiet or very, very loud. However, that being said, again, this is a way to polish, not a way to create. And if you overuse this, it will sound very, very unnatural. Okay, I'm not going to go into all of the subtle stuff about how to set it up. I'll do that in a separate tutorial. Again, we have our presets, kick, snare, bass, and vocal, which you can just click and have it ready to go, which is wonderful. So that's the compressor. Now let's go to the Sends tab. The Sends tab allows us to control which bus we're sending to. Okay? What are the buses? They're the aux buses. Okay? The aux buses are going to be our monitor mixes. Okay, so what channel are we editing? Channel 5. So let's pretend for a minute that bus 1 is the drum monitor. Drummer wants to hear more cymbals. He's got more cymbals. The drummer wants to hear more kick. I selected the kick channel. He's got more kick. But look, bus 2, whoever that goes to, whatever monitor that goes to, is also hearing some kick. He wants to hear less. Okay, so we turn that off, or down a little bit. And everything else, the kick drum is turned completely off in all of the other bus mixes. Okay? That's all there is to sends. As a general rule, just leave it set to post EQ. Don't even mess with these bus sends and what they do. It gets pretty complicated. You can also adjust, by the way, effect sends here, like how much of effects 1, how much signal is being sent to effects 1, effects 2, effects 3, or effects 4. Okay, and leave that at post fader as well. You would very seldom change these settings except for specific instances. If you have questions about that, you can always ask me about it. Okay, so from sends, we move on to output. What does this do? Not much. It allows us to change pan from left to right to center. Notice that this one's panned a little bit to the left. If we look at the other symbol, and if I did this right, it's panned a little to the right. Okay, just make that a little more even. So now I got a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left. And another opportunity to take it out of the main stereo mix if you want to, which you probably never will. Okay, the next tab is effects. I'm not going to get crazy into this. I'm probably going to break this off into a separate little lecture on what it does. But basically, there's a whole bunch of different effects, from delay to reverb to tremolo to chorus, phaser, you name it. All modeled in here. Many, many, many different effects. Some of them are good, some of them are terrible. And it allows you to pick which reverb you want for each effects. Remember before, back in the other tabs, we saw FX1, FX2, 3, and 4. If we pick different effects for each one, we then have different effects that we can apply to individual sources. Believe clicking on edit here allows you to actually change the parameters of the effect. Definitely not going into that here because that gets very complicated very quickly. Basically, this is our off-board rack. The rack that sits to the right of the board right now is all done in this nifty little window, and it doesn't cost us a penny for off-board gear. You don't have to use it at all, and I would say don't mess with it much until you get very comfortable with the basic elements of mixing. Okay, and on to the meter tab. And remember I said that meter and mixer were the only tabs that were not channel dependent, meaning whatever I have selected is what I'm editing. Well, meter isn't channel dependent because it's just showing me my inputs and my outputs. Okay? These are my input levels on all of my channels. These are the levels going to my effects sends, and my effects returns. These are the signals going to my bus outputs or my monitor outputs. These are my USB returns, which again are used in computer recording. Nothing you need to worry about right now. And P16 Ultranet is a Behringer proprietary in-ear monitor system that we don't use, so you don't have to worry about that either. So simply put, that is the meter screen. Oh yeah, and here's your mains. All this stuff will be blinking and moving like crazy when you're live. Okay? Now, that's everything over here. Let's talk about this. This is the master strip. I made that up. Just seems like a good name. You saw the setup button that we clicked to connect early on. You remember that. Routing you do not need to worry about. That is typically a recording thing or for very advanced applications. Down here though, remember the clear solo just turns off any solo that's turned on. This is where it starts to get very important. This main strip is controlled by this strip next to it. This is the main strip control area. So right now, as with everything else, main left right is highlighted. So what do you think this control is controlling? The main left right. Okay? That's the main volume for your front of house speakers. Now, if I click on bus 1, what is bus 1 again? It's going to be a monitor mix, which by the way can be renamed. I've named it Vox 1. We could call it just as easily bass. And we could change it to purple. And then we know what we're actually affecting. Notice that all the faders changed color when I did that. When I was on main, they were black. When I went to the bus, they turned blue. That just reminds me that I am not editing the main mix, and anything I do to these guys won't be reflected in those main speakers. However, it will be reflected in the bass monitor. So this is another place, just like up here in sends, to adjust these levels. It allows me to take bus 1 and say, okay, he wants a little more kick drum. He's got it. A little less snare, a little more toms, a little less toms too, no cymbals at all, right? So I changed his monitor mix completely there. Now watch what happens when I go back to main left right. Didn't change those, did it? Go back to bus 1 again, and you see the changes are reflected there. So I could change the second monitor mix. I could also change that to purple and call it electric guitar. Okay? And this, of course, is the main volume, just like the main aux volume on our analog desk for that monitor itself. The monitor itself has a great mix, but it's just too loud. Let me turn it down a little bit here. Okay? Same is true right on down. Bus 3, bus 4, bus 5, bus 6, and the main effects. Okay? This is the level of effects 1, 2, 3, and 4, the main output level. Remember, I showed you that back here. If I take effects 1 and turn it down to 0, this no longer matters. Effects 1 here, because it's not doing anything. It's not putting out any signal at all, right? Effects 2, effects 3, and effects 4. This is just the overall volume for whatever is selected here. Okay? And also, you are able to save the settings on your computer. Let's say I want to call this Church 1. I save it. Now I've got a backup of that configuration. And if I ever accidentally do something like, remember I talked about this, PC to console, and wipe everything, I can open that up, Church 1 SCN, say open, and it recalls everything. Of course, nothing's changed. But if I was to do, let's do this. All right, turn all this up. And just to show you it works. Now I open Church 1 SCN, and those levels go back to where they were a second ago. So you can use it, you know, as a backup. You can also use it to just kind of save as you go, in case you're about to make a big change or something, you're unsure what it's going to do. You know, always recall that scene back to where you were. And that really is the Behringer X-Air Edit application in a nutshell. I hope you've enjoyed the lecture, and I'll probably follow this up with lecture. Listen to me, I'm like some kind of professor or something. The tutorial, the brief tutorial on Behringer X-Air Edit, and I'll probably follow this up with another one on a little bit about what compression and gate and EQ really is, and some of the other principles in digital mixing. So thanks for listening. Look forward to working with you on this. And thanks for being a great team, guys. I love you all in Jesus. Have a great day or night.